Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it is time for Friday Reads on January 19th. I sound so confident and self-assured, but that's because I had to check the calendar and delete the first time I started making this video and got 10 seconds in before I lost track of everything. And now I've confessed and I can move forward. So let's see. This week we have been on the Texas weather roller coaster. It has been everything from mid 70s to low 20s at different points in the days and nights, and that is just since last Sunday or Monday. Like in the past 4 or 5 days, it has been everything. And right now it's sunny and chilly, and I think it's going to be like cold. I don't know. It just is. But I'm happy that when we have winter, it lasts for maybe 2 days and then it goes away, and then maybe it comes back again for a day or two. Intermittent winter, I can kind of handle it. I couldn't handle like full on months long block of winter. That just wouldn't work for me. So I hope that you are hanging on wherever you are if you're in one of these very cold and snowy spots and reading some good books. So let's talk about what's been going on. Oh wait, first of all, I will say, in case you watched the last video or two, we did put the caterpillar or the chrysalis back outside. It did not try to emerge in the house, and it is in a safe spot now in the backyard until it's ready to do its thing. I was out of town last weekend for a couple days. We went to see my daughter before her semester started at school, and so I have like a little mini haul of just, I said I was slowing down on purchases, and I have, but there were a couple of things that straggled in, and we did go to Book People, so I have a couple of things to share with you on Tuesday. I'm going to save it for then. And anyway, we had a good time. That was before the weather got bad, and she's in her final semester. She has filed for graduation in May. I have booked a hotel for that weekend. Things are happening. Change is in the air. So let's talk about TV for a minute. What have we watched? Okay, so a couple of good things happened. We saw the finale of Fargo, and this was one of their best seasons, in my opinion. And I think I've watched all the seasons, and they have been a mixed bag. I think that this one and the one that had Jesse Plemons and Kirsten Dunst and Ted Danson, these two are my favorites. This particular season was, I thought, really good. The finale, I really enjoyed. I liked the examination in this season of the nature of debt, the concept of debt and repayment that was played out in a lot of different ways in the plot. I thought that the casting and the acting was really good. If you have watched this and you have been sort of entertained or perplexed by the accent that Jennifer Jason Leigh's character uses, I read an interview and she said that she watched old videos of William F. Buckley to get this accent that she thought would be appropriate to the character. And so go and watch a couple of YouTube clips of William F. Buckley and you will realize that is why that accent sounded vaguely familiar. So we enjoyed that very much. And then last night we started watching True Detective, the new season with Jodie Foster, and woo, the first episode, it was a banger. It was really good. It takes place in a small town in Alaska, which immediately reminded me of that book I read last year, The City Under One Roof. But it's a small town, and the first episode really sets up a lot of things about the characters and their issues. So we kind of get an introduction to the main players and some of their their relatives or their relationships and complications and things like that. We get kind of the beginning of a police procedural where there's a research station in the Arctic, and all of a sudden all of the scientists have disappeared. And so the police come in trying to figure out what happened. And it may or may not have a connection to an old case that was never solved of a woman who was brutally murdered. And then there's some old baggage about that case between the two women, one of whom is a detective and the other one's a state trooper who used to be on the police force. So that's kind of the setup. So that part was good enough, like all of the small town stuff and the complicated relationships. But then there's also a supernatural aspect. I think it's going to be a mystery slash horror story, and I don't want to say anything more in case you're going to watch it. But it was creepy. It was creepy. But let us not tarry anymore on television. Let's talk about the books. And there's some that I finished, some that I'm in the middle of. Let's take a look at all of it. First of all, when we left off, I was kind of near the end of Blackwater, Lightship, or I don't know if I was near the end. Maybe I hadn't gotten that far. But anyway, I finished reading this while we were out of town, and this was really good. I don't know what else this year has in store, but right now I have this marked down as a quiet gem of 2024. And I hope if that's, where the bar begins, it can only get better, I think. The story takes place in the 90s, and it centers around the relationships in a family, mostly about a woman named Helen, who is a school principal who's married and has 2 children, and about her fraught relationship with her mother and her grandmother. And they have been mostly estranged, pretty low contact over the years since she finished college and left home. And they are forced back into close proximity by the news that Helen's brother Declan is dying of AIDS. Declan has been sick for several years, but he had not told his family that he has AIDS. He's been in and out of the hospital. He has some really good friends who have helped to care for him, but now it's reached a point where he wants everybody to know. And he wants Helen to tell his mother and grandmother. Helen is put in charge of sharing all of this news, and Declan is getting out of the hospital, even though it'll probably be a temporary departure, and he wants to go to his grandmother's home where he lived for a while when he was a kid. All of this is very tied up into a lot of emotional background in this family about the period of time when Helen's own father was dying of cancer, and her mother, Lily, left them in the grandmother's care for about 6 months or so, and they didn't tell the children what was going to happen. This is a family that spends a lot of time not talking about things and then holding resentments and unresolved emotions about the fallout of finding out things in the wrong way, or feeling that they were misinformed, or I don't know, they spend a lot of time misunderstanding one another because they don't communicate. And so we get this scenario where they're all in the grandmother's house together, and it's just this old ramshackle house that needs a lot of repairs, but the grandmother just kind of goes about her daily business and doesn't attend to any of these things. And they're forced by the proximity to start having these conversations that they have not had. It's all in the quiet moments, and sometimes it's in the moments where nobody's talking. There's a long scene where everyone's just kind of sitting in a room being quiet, and Declan's sleeping, and every now and then somebody gets up and leaves the room and comes back. Other times, even the more charged or slightly fiery conversations, they're not big dramatic throwing the plates kind of things. They're much more subtle than that and realistic. And there's just a lot of fine details in the writing that I really loved in this story. And a couple of things that I particularly loved is when Helen is talking to Declan's friends and trying, especially Paul, and trying to explain to him why she doesn't talk to her mother and grandmother and why this has been going on so long, and the difficulty of explaining the weirdness of your family to someone else who's just sitting there going, "But I just still don't get it." And I can relate to that so much. And then another little detail that's really not that important to the plot or anything, but that completely resonated with me is a scene where Helen is trying to drop Declan off at the hospital, and she realizes that she has no idea what part of the hospital to go to. And have you ever experienced this where you were supposed to go to a particular clinic or office, and you realize that there are a million entrances to this hospital and a bunch of different buildings, and they all have different names and they all have different parking lots, and he's in the car and he's not well, and the people at the desk are obtuse, and I thought, oh, that's awful, but I've been there. So I really love this quiet exploration of these family relationships, and I'm enjoying my slow exploration of Colm Toibin. Another play, not a book, but a play that I finished this week was A Winter's Tale by William Shakespeare that I've been reading to participate in the Bard Room. I'm going to say this was not my favorite of plays that I am familiar with by Shakespeare. I don't think this is considered one of his strongest works, and I didn't consider it that way either. It's pretty wacky. I mean, and even some of the really good stories have pretty wacky plots, but this one, it's kind of like I don't know, there wasn't enough good stuff in between to get away with the goofiness of this plot, which I'm going to link a video that Melinda has reviewing this play in more detail, and hers has spoilers. I'm just going to give you a little brief outline, but if you want more discussion and a bigger picture, watch her video that she posted the other day. Basically, there are two kingdoms, and the kings are good friends. One king is visiting the other. Polixenes is visiting Leontes' kingdom. And he's been there for months and months and months, but he needs to leave. And he's like, yeah, I gotta go home, got stuff to attend to. And I'm thinking, it must be a nice life where you're the king, but you can take off months and months, whatever. And Leontes is trying to say, oh no, stay a little longer, stay a little longer. And then he turns to his wife, Hermione, who's very pregnant, and says, you talk him into it. Tell him he's got to stay longer. And she's like, yeah, you know what? We sure wish you would stay longer. And then he's like, okay, fine, I'll stay a little bit longer. Instantly, on a dime, with no warning, Leontes decides that this means Hermione is having an affair and that she's carrying the other king's child. And he just goes nuts. And then everything goes sideways and dire consequences ensue. That's all I'm going to tell you. But it's highly implausible that somebody would be sane enough that you would want to visit them for months and months on end and then suddenly go batshit crazy. But that's what happens. And I won't tell you the rest. But anyway, I did read it. I'm glad I read it. It has expanded my personal encyclopedia of what Shakespeare I've read, I guess. But I did not love it. I mean, I wasn't excited to get back to it. I was like, okay, gotta read it. Let's see what happens. But I'm very excited that next month is The Merry Wives of Windsor, so I think that will be a lot of fun. All right. Another book that I finished over the past week is Messenger by Lois Lowry. This is one of the books in the quartet of parallel or related novels. It's called the Giver Quartet. They're not exactly a series, but they have connections with each other. And this is a buddy read that I'm doing of the quartet with Michael Clark. We read The Giver a few weeks ago, and now we're reading Messenger. And I'm not going to say too much about it because we haven't talked about it at all yet. I got a little bit ahead in the reading, and so I want to save my good stuff for the Discord. The Giver is really science fiction and dystopian young adult, where, you know, the world is, people have created a world that is very stable, calm, literally colorless, devoid of emotion, devoid of pain or miserable thoughts or memories. And then one person in society holds all of that pain and the full extent of emotions and everything for the community. And a child is chosen to be the next giver who's going to be the person who holds all that. In this book, there's another kind of a community that is, at first it seems happier and more accepting. It's a peaceful place. Everyone has their certain roles. There's a young protagonist named Maddie who has a person who didn't grow up from the start in this village, but this village accepts outsiders who come in who seek refuge for different reasons. But something is starting to happen and change in the community, and not for the good. And Maddie is entrusted with a certain voyage that he has to undertake. That's all I'm going to tell you about this right now, except that what I thought was interesting was that the giver was science fiction, and this one is more like a fantasy. There's a forest that can choose to be kind or hostile to people passing through, and it becomes more scary and malevolent as the book progresses. It's a different kind of construct, and I think that's interesting that she's exploring a different style or avenue and a different way in which a dystopian society might go astray. In each case, there's a reason or a rationale why the place is like it is, and then something is not right. So anyway, I enjoyed reading this, and I know we will have a good conversation about it. So that brings me to the two books that I am currently reading. And I will tell you that Bleak House is still on a hiatus, but I'm going to bring it back in after I finish one of these books, because I am not reading 3 books at a time anymore. I've already discussed that. I am reading 2 books right now. One of them is the nonfiction book that I picked out for this month, and that is the author is Carol Shields. The book is Jane Austen, A Life. And this book was specifically recommended by Sonya of An Enthusiastic Reader when I talked about my nonfiction reading habits. And I talked about how I don't really care for biographies, and they're always too long, and I don't read a ton of memoirs either, especially celebrity ones. But anyway, she recommended this as an excellent short biography of an author that I really love by another author that is really excellent. And I am enjoying this very much. This book was published in 2001. Carol Shields passed away in 2003. She examines Jane Austen's life and her writing with an eye towards the role of women at that time in Jane Austen's family and her life specifically, and in general in England in the time period in which she lived at the end of the 18th century and beginning of the 19th century. In some ways, her research material didn't give her everything she wanted to work with, because so much of that people in that time, it's tied up in the letters they wrote, the letters that were saved. And Jane's sister Cassandra destroyed a ton of the letters that were between them. And so we can only think that all the really juicy stuff might have been in those letters, but we do know enough about events to put together and kind of correlate with her novels, their appearance, some of the themes that she explores in there. I also like how she talks about the divide, the 10-year gap between the first 3 novels and the last 3 novels, and what was going on in the Austen family's life that could have contributed to that. So I'm enjoying this very much. When I finish it, I will bring Bleak House back in as my book number 2. The other one that I am currently reading is Riambel by Priya Hein. You did not see this on my TBR because it wasn't there. This is mood reading. And this is a book I bought several months ago, and I keep meaning to get to it. And I was at a point where I was looking for a new piece of fiction to read, and I had a very strong desire to read something from a different place, somewhere I was unfamiliar with. I wanted to explore a different life. And so I picked this book that is set on the island nation of Mauritius. I know nothing about Mauritius except what I looked up right before reading this and what I'm learning by reading this. It is an island nation off the east coast of Africa, and I did just a quick little Wikipedia style reading in advance about the history of this country when it became independent in the late 60s. Its long history of British and French colonization and the sugar trade. And they brought slaves. Now I'm learning through the novel that the current status, the sugar trade is still ongoing, and also tourism, because it has beautiful beaches. And it is sharply divided between, at least with the characters in this novel, between the white French descendants who live in affluent neighborhoods, and then the working class people that are the descendants of the enslaved people, who are still the service class for the white wealthy citizens. And they live in shanty towns. And our main character is Noemi, who is a young girl who lives with her mother. And she talks a lot about a sister Marie. We don't find out till later in the book why Marie is not still there with them. And her mother works for a wealthy French Mauritian family called Franco Mauritians, I think. And she works for this, and her mother before her also worked for this household. And Noemi is destined to also go and work for this household. She's a teenage girl. She enjoys school. She doesn't really, she loves reading and writing, and she's not really excited about becoming a housekeeper or maid at this home. And so that's where we're at in the book. Her mother's pressuring her to start coming and working at the house. We have very beautiful descriptions in this book of both the natural beauty of the place, Noemi's connection with the ocean and the beach, but then the startling poverty of their home, which is basically just a 2-room shack with the most primitive of amenities, and how even their house, though, is fancier than other people's homes because of the outcast materials that her mother brings home from her job. This is described in this passage. They also give Mama things that they no longer have any use for: some coloring crayons for my crude sketches, scraps of paper for my scribblings, a rag of words, torn copies of Paris Match with outdated pictures of European princesses waving at an adoring crowd, which I devour, a teddy bear with a missing eye, and things that are still serviceable in our household: a slightly stained tablecloth, old cotton sheets frayed along the edges, a dainty teapot that's lost its handle, a wooden cupboard without a door, a colorful dress that has shrunk in the wash. These little gifts make our tilakas by far the nicest. So Noemi is poised for something. I haven't gotten far enough to find out what it is, but there is an ominous vibe in this story. The chapters of Noemi's tale are interspersed with italicized pages in between that describe the life of enslaved people in the past. And I feel like some parallels might be drawn between their lives and Noemi's life. And there's also some interspersed recipes of traditional foods from Mauritius. I don't know why that's a tongue twister. So that's kind of a lighter aspect that comes into the story as well. But so far I am loving it. It's beautifully written. It's pretty short. I mean, I think I started last night and I'm about a third of the way through. And it's also it's really pretty. And it's this beautiful French flap, thick paperback. It has a really good feel. It has that kind of matte finish, indigo press. So even though I am a hardback kind of lady, I really like a good quality, thick paperback with French flaps. So I'm enjoying that book very much. There's just something about the book having a tactical pleasure that enhances my reading experience. Do you feel like that too? All right, so let me know if you have read any of these things I talked about this week, or what did you read instead, or what are you looking forward to in the upcoming week. And I will be back on Tuesday with a little teeny weeny, it's not, you can't even call it a haul. It's just a couple of additions. We'll call it that. A couple of additions to my library. So have a great weekend and I will see you then. Bye-bye.